Well, on the day we find out Norway is pulling its fighter jets out of Libya, outgoing Defense Secretary Robert Gates has some frank comments about what's become a growing divide among NATO countries.
I've worried openly about NATO turning into a two-tiered alliance between those willing and able to pay the price and bear the burdens of alliance commitments and those who enjoy the benefits of NATO membership, be they security guarantees or headquarters billets, but don't want to share the risks and the costs. This is no longer a hypothetical worry. We are there today, and it is unacceptable.
And surprise, surprise, Libya costing all of us here in America more than anticipated, already up to $664 million, and that's just through mid-May. The original estimate we were given was $750 million by the end of the summer. Remember, this mission in Libya, of course, is what we around here call a not war. Meanwhile, continuing to spend money we do not have while losing American lives both in Iraq and in Afghanistan. Just this week in Baghdad, the deadliest attack on U.S. troops since we officially ended combat last summer. 5 soldiers killed, the bombing provoked by concerns that America will refuse to withdraw the remainder of its troops by year's end, as we have promised. Defense Secretary nominee Leon Panetta.
It's clear to me that Iraq is, is considering the possibility of making a request for some kind of presence to remain there.
Meanwhile, in Afghanistan, more than 100,000 of our troops in that country, and our best-case scenario for so-called withdrawal leaves 85% of those boots on the ground come New Year's 2012. I want to bring in today's specialist. Marine Major Jane Blair served in Iraq. Major Blair also wrote the book Hesitation Kills, a female Marine officer's combat experience in Iraq. And Major, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the program.
Thanks, Dylan. Thanks so much for having me on.
Educate us a little bit. What is the dynamic of escalating violence against American troops in Iraq relative to the political rhetoric in Iraq and our own country about staying beyond this year?
Well, I think it's important for us to know that we're in here for the long haul. I mean, it's been 8 years already that we've been in Iraq, and I think, although it's not the popular thing to withdraw, we have to really assess that if we did withdraw on a full scale, we have to be careful of leading to a failed state, which is just unacceptable. I mean, withdrawal on a full-scale measure would mean that we are possibly making Iraq into the next Somalia.
At the same time, are we putting our own soldiers, and I don't disagree with what you just said, I'm not even qualified to disagree with what you just said, but at the same time, by leaving people there, are we putting our own soldiers' lives at risk simply by virtue of the fact that we told them that we would leave, and then when we say that we're not leaving, it's easy political fodder for some of the political forces in that country to say, oh, watch me, I'm a powerful Iraqi, and I'm going to chase these Americans out of here because I'm here to take care of you.
Well, I think it's very important that we cooperate with the Iraqi government and work on a solution that involves them full force. It's important that we begin that dialogue and continue that dialogue so that we're on the same page about where to progress. Obviously, we don't want to continue an unpopular presence there. And, the military works on this. They work with the local government to ensure a transition of some sort. And it's important we move towards a transition in Iraq, Afghanistan. We obviously don't want to be in these countries forever. It's a cost to us, not just in terms of our money, but it's a cost to our lives, too, American lives, being there.
Go ahead, Ari.
Major, in your view, what do the conditions need to be for a full withdrawal? And not only that, but how long can you ignore American public opinion if the public wants a full withdrawal?
Well, there are certainly generals that are more qualified to deal with this question than me. But on a personal level, I think that, ultimately expecting some kind of stabilization of the Iraqi government, for example, would be an indicator of success there, where the police are full-scale able to handle security threats at the time, where they're not expected to really rely on us as a military force to hold the stability of the country. And I think they're achieving that on many levels. We've seen a movement towards a greater level of stability in Iraq, and certainly Iraq is moving towards that.
Major Blair, this is Krystal, and I wanted to ask you a little bit of a different question. First of all, thank you for your service. We've been having a debate about whether women should be allowed officially to serve in combat roles, and I wanted to ask you, is that even a meaningful distinction anymore, given the types of wars that we're fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere?
Thanks for the question, Krystal. It is a meaningful discussion to have, and I think there's a lot of policymakers right now who are considering this, and there's been landmark legislation that has discussed this very issue. Getting to your point, I think women, as you pointed out, are already serving in the combat role. They've already been out on the front lines in Afghanistan and Iraq. So regarding putting women in these roles, we already have women in these roles. I think it's up to the policymakers to decide whether we should extend that role to infantry or greater levels of the front line, where you're going to see women not just in combat engagement teams, but serving some kind of frontline role where they're actually holding some kind of combat billet in that capacity. It's a discussion that's going on right now.
Major, it's Touré. You talked about the political capital that's going on in Iraq. You talked about the human capital. You've seen all this playing out in real time in front of your eyes on the ground. After having seen that, do you believe in the mission?
I do believe in the mission. I think war and conflict should always be a last resort, of course. We see that in Libya. We see how much it affects Americans engaging in another conflict. Certainly there's been casualties, but when you compare this to other wars, such as World War II, Vietnam, thankfully our casualties have been minimal compared to that. Not that there's ever an acceptable level of casualties, but, Middle East stability is an important mission for America. It's an important region for us to be involved with. And I think it's important for us to keep an open dialogue with the Middle East about our involvement there and to get their buy-in as well. We can't do this alone, though.
If you were to look at the greatest threat to Iraq, which would appear to be the projection of Iranian power into a weak or a vacuum-like state in Iraq, allowing an expansion of Iranian power relative to Saudi Arabia, how confident are you that Iraq will not become a sub-state of Iran?
This is an interesting point for discussion. I think certainly we need to consider Iran's role, which policymakers consider. But, it's something we need to keep our eye on, whether Iran is going to be a, formidable presence within this area. I'm not an expert on Iran, and I'm certainly not an expert on these dynamics, but I say that it's something that policymakers need to keep their eye on, is whether there will be this kind of influence. I think Saudi Arabia probably keeps this at bay, so it's probably a balance and shift of power between these two countries.
Yeah, it certainly looks like a Cold War on some level, or a semi-Cold War between Iran and Saudi Arabia when you back up and take a look at that map. Major Blair, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your service, and it's a pleasure to learn a little bit about what you are spending your time doing and the message you're looking to deliver. The book, Hesitation Kills, a female Marine officer's combat experience in Iraq, speaks a lot to Krystal's question about the role of women in the modern American military.